Hello, everybody. Welcome to a very special episode on Human Up TV. I'm your host, Näthan Gangadean, and my co-host is here with me, Dr. Ashok Gangadean. And we're going to take you on a very special and unique, dare I say again, unprecedented journey here with something that my father brought through in the late 90s called the 7 Stages of Deep Dialogue. And we've long since wanted to really bring this to public awareness at the right time. And it seems there's no better time than right now, not only for the United States, but the whole planet over, because what this really addresses is a deep, long-standing blindness in the human consciousness that all of the great wisdom of the planet has been seeking to liberate us from, so that we can transcend this era in human development, let's say, of violence and monologue and ideological supremacy and all forms of racism and sexism and breakdowns in communication, not just between entire races or religions or people, but also right down to the our lover relationships, our parent-child relationships, friendships. Every possible form of relationship thrives in a space of deep dialogue. And now deep dialogue, as my father has coined it, is more than just dialogue. Try to think of it not just as, we hear the word dialogue and we think of, oh, two people talking, right? But I want you to understand deep dialogue in a much deeper sense. It's really the art and science of realizing love, peace, harmony, communication, in every sense for humanity on all levels. In other words, we all know that at some point or another, humanity has got to evolve to the next level beyond this era of wars and breakdowns and violence. We know that, right? We're on the verge, dangerously so, on the verge of almost resigning to, well, you know, this is just life, you know, there's war, there's violence, you know, it's just a fact of life. Wrong. We cannot do that. We cannot resign to that. We cannot become complacent. We have to realize that this is very, very wrong, what we've gotten used to, and that there is a deep science to the cause of these deep breakdowns. And the American lab is just one place where it's becoming so glaringly obvious, the polarization that ensues when we don't have the deep science, source science, as we like to call it. Activision is another one of our favorite terms for the capacity for deep dialogue, which is love, which is peace, which is harmony, in the polis and on in the local all the way to the global. So it's the art and science of people across religious borders being able to not just stand back and hold the other at arm's length and tolerate each other, but to really understand one another, to really go into the other person's world and to be brave and bold enough to drop our rigid stances to really encounter the other person. Again, not at arm's length, not looking at the other person, but really looking in the other person, if I could say it that way. So that's kind of how I see this 7 stages that we're going to take you through today is just a brilliant, I feel a truly historic, it's more than just a document. It's a way, it's a blueprint, or I would even go so far as to say it's more than a blueprint. It's a gold print. It's a way for humanity on every level, as I've said, to go from this space of monologue and violence and war and ideological breakdowns, and to cross that great divide, so to speak, to evolve to that next level. This is a guide, a way, a bridge, when truly understood, that every human being should assimilate into their awareness, so that we may safely make this crossing that we know we have to make. And I always like to say that if what humanity had to do in order to come to a place of true harmony were easy, we'd be there already. People are good. And I'm willing to say all people are good. Every single one of us. When we see bad people or hurtful people or violent people or extremist ideology people or anything like that, it's so easy to condemn them and to condemn one another for bad behavior. But I would invite you in this moment to see it not in that sense, but to introduce a kind of compassion for all human beings. No matter what we've done, we have to see it that as a whole, we are contending with a very deep sickness. It's a virus of the being. And we show in all of our offerings, it's a virus of our mentation. We don't just say mental, but mentation. It's not a mental illness, but a mentation illness, which covers not just minding, which is at the crux of it, but emotions and all forms of human experience have to do with a mentation practice, and in our case, a malpractice that's so deep that it is the way that we see, and therefore we don't know how to see it. So we get informed and misinformed, really more accurately, by this code of mentation that we all inherit generation after generation, that our wisdom teachings are seeking to bring into the awareness, precisely because it is so hard to see. If this were easy, we'd be there already. And it's not that we're not where humanity is meant to be because we're bad. That's what I'm trying to get. Before I hand the baton to you, Dad, I just want to I want you all viewing this to feel that we're not bad. In fact, I would go so far as to say no one is inherently bad. We have a vast array, a vast spectrum of how deeply the illness has affected us as a whole and as individuals. And we want to come from a place of compassion now and see that, hey, if we're going to do this crossing, we've got to do it together. If we're going to do it together, we must unite in a place that is beyond ideology and beyond opinion. And we have to see the deep science in order to unite in the crossing. And that's what how I see these 7 stages of deep dialogue, a really profound, almost a profile of a great shift, a profile of what a human being must encounter and go through and let go of and open up to in order to become a truly evolved human being, in order to human up and to become whole together. So that is how I would like to introduce this. And Dad, I would love for you to say a few words, and then we can just go for it and start reading. We'll bring it up on the screen for you, those of you joining us who want to read along. And this is going to be a lot of fun. And again, this is not information. This is really a process. This is doing what it is talking about. It's not just talking about it. It's going to open up pathways in your mind. And I invite you to read, to drop, just for the time being, drop any rigidity of mind, drop any skepticism, and just open up to this profound process. And you will feel the opening that it facilitates. Pause. Okay, so I'm just hitting pause now. I'm going to edit this out. I just noticed my computer battery is dead. Or not dead. Oh, the thing wasn't fully plugged in. And if I didn't catch that, it would have died in the middle. So I caught it just in time. I'm going to cut this part out that I just said.
Okay, but what you said was recorded.
Yes, what I said was recorded. It's just that I noticed the low battery symbol, and I was like, oh shit, did I unplug it earlier when I was vacuuming? So let's not lose the momentum. So I'll edit this part out. But coming back. So Dad, as the person who brought this through, I would love for you to speak to what I just said and to share your thoughts as we intro this powerful document.
Thank you, Näthan. Your opening, setting up the context is beautifully done, because the 7 stages of deep dialogue, I'd like to just augment and build upon what you beautifully opened up. For what stages of what, and how do you approach it? And you beautifully said, it's a global pathway into becoming an awakened human being, an integral first person, our best version of ourselves, individually and collectively, within our culture and across cultures, across religions, across all borders. Dialogue is the dialogos, tap the logos. And I think I'd like to say that in my career as a philosopher, lover of Sophia, and going deeply into philosophy, I've been teaching now for 51 years, 52nd years, a year at Haverford College, founded by the Quakers, and residing in the Center for Dialogue, a Margaret Guest Center for dialogue across religions, cultures, and worlds, to celebrate diversity across worlds, and yet to open up to the possibility of unity. That was a lab I was living and teaching in at Haverford. So over the 50-year journey, where I was seeking and teaching and living in the great traditions, following and tracing from Abraham to Moses to Jesus, Muhammad, and the Islamic tradition unfolding all through the Sufi wisdom of Rumi and into the modern age. So from Abraham, Moses, Jesus, all the way through to the Quakers founding Haverford College, saying there's that of God in every person, and founding the college on that vision. Philadelphia, where we're living here in Philadelphia, the founding of the birthing of the nation 250 years ago, 1776, founding in here in Philadelphia. We hold these truths to be self-evident. One nation under source, under law, indivisible, all of those kind of thinking. Looking at Plato, Socrates, a moral hero for Europe. And Socrates is an embodiment of wisdom, the wise one. Again, philosophia. And Socrates is saying, we've got to leave the cave of everyday common sense, uncritical thinking, to come into the Logos and become awakened and find and know thyself. So there's a rite of passage for Socrates to leave the cave of ignorance and become awakened in the quest for the Logos, which is what? The light of reason. And so whether it's looking from the biblical tradition, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, evolving and unfolding over 2,500 years, or going into the Socrates, all the way through to contemporary culture, and in the American experiment, for example. It's a global journey for all human beings. Or going into the ancient wisdom of yoga, teaching of the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, and the yoga breakthrough of technology to rise into the Om, to leave the ego-based way of being a human, and getting awakened into the Om, into union with the source, the journey to the source. It's a great call to let go of our deeply ingrained everyday cultural ways, as great as they may be, but that are still impeding us from going into a more mature version of ourselves. Or Buddha's great experiment 2,500 years ago, where Buddha wanted to end the human suffering, to see that humans suffer existentially by being cut off from a deeper encounter with reality. And Buddha's great awakening and his Four Noble Truths were global truths for all humans. It's a pathway to go from ignorance, from the cave, from suffering, into the awakened place of the Dharma, of ethics, of Lao Tzu in the Chinese, Lao Tzu, the Tao, that is named is not the Tao. And this hologram emerged for me over these 5 decades of research into what is the depth of what is fundamental, what is first, what is at the deepest level, holding, which is reality itself, being, the original word. And where they were using the Greek word logos in the logos, but not in the Greek tribal sense in any way, but in a global sense. So global space, global reason, is the awakening of human reason. And it's a journey of rational beings. We're rational beings, logos sapiens. But if we're in a journey, hitting a space in which it's more, we're living a technology, that's what the red line means. It's a technology of mentation, as you say, Näthan, of how are we conducting our minds. And our great teachers and enlightenment teachers and journeys are all seeing, how do we leave the cave and enter the light? The light of the mind, the light of being a human, the blossoming of our being, the realizing of ourselves. What is the technology? And so the double parentheses is a code marker for when we're crossing, and the single space is a marker of how we think, how we make our worlds, what is our experience, what is our language, what is our worldview. And that's what this space is. It's a screen upon which we, I or we, whatever culture or situation that we're situated within, when we're in this space, it cuts us off. This line, Näthan, that you speak, the Great Divide. This technology has the effect, this matrix, this code, this logic, this grammar, this way of being rational, right? This is marking, is a way of talking about it. It's the power of language here. It's how we tap the logos in this space, and then we have the logos and reason. And so we can have the language here, or reason here. And that's a technology of how we talk about it. So I and the we, on the screen of awareness, we talk about the object of our perception. What is it? What is my experience? Who am I? And whether you say, well, there's a subject and a predicate, and we join it, and we create information, this is the information space. Whatever logic we're using in the space, I. So our world, the lens we have of the mind, we all have a lens that we're interpreting. So this arrow means this is the space of our rational life, our everyday feelings, emotions, experiences, all in the space. And it's equal opportunity. All cultures across the planet can be using this, and it's using a technology that seems so unassailable, that we name things and they're separate. A is A. Everything has its own ID. It gives us the information startup, so we can name things, whatever we say. Snow is white. Rain is fall, whatever it is, information. I feel hurt. I am cold. I am angry. My inner mental states are all, my psychic states, my inner world, my outer world, all in this technology. This is important, Näthan, because without realizing, because this is where we see and have our language power. Our language, our reason, our experience is all here. So the single marker is a code of being embedded within this space. And our great teachers in the Logos call, the call of Logos, calling on us to cross, to question, to step back from being dominated and captivated and colonized at this stage of rational cognitive human development. It's a stage of our human eons of evolution to taming the word here on our terms and speaking and having our worldview. So this space represents all of our diverse worldviews and narratives and stories and disciplines of education in our culture, the different cultures, all of our different ethnic orientations, gender oriented, all going on here. This technology is equal opportunity. You might say that the human condition is situated here, but it's all within this, always within the logosphere. That's the main point. We couldn't have any narrative without the narrative source of the word. In the beginning is the logos, the word, the logosophia, using the Greek word, but not here, not logos here, but the source. So our great geniuses of our scriptures and enlightenment teachings realize there's something on the ground floor, there's something first. It's infinite. That's why the infinite sign. And if it's infinite, it's infinitely one. You can't break it apart. So that this double parentheses technology is a code marker for the logos code. This is the logos code. And without the logos code, we couldn't have any of our everyday cultural codes and grammars and technologies of making our stories. So all of our narratives are here in this beautiful space that we can talk about it and have information. It's Google space, information. But if it's embedded within the red zone, so to speak, in that technology, and we can't see, we see this way, but it's hard to see this way. Something has to happen to break this barrier and become aware and to see from zoom out, so to speak, in order to zero in. You've got to zoom out. And the great breakthroughs, if the call to Abraham, put God first, God speaking here, God speaks to us and says, love me with all you've got, mind, body, soul, and put me first. We can't put first when we're in a derivative. This is derivative. It's a download. It's not first. To put first, we have to mature and cross into a deeper space in which I face the other. The other here is not the same as the other here. So to go from this place, the I encounters an object, an it. It's an it, an object. It's I, it. And if we treat ourselves in the it space, this is it space, and we make ourselves here. I've got my ID, so I'm an it too. So this place, without knowing it, the red zone objectifies self and other. And if we try to have dialogue, imagine all of the different religious worlds. Judaism, Christianity, Hindu, and on, different feminism, so all different, competing for the narrative space. If we try to dialogue in the laboratory of the Margaret Guest Center for Dialogue, where for decades I've had different perspectives and interfaith dialogues and intercultural dialogues and intertradition dialogue, and you can speak to the other in your lens, but you're not moving into a deeper encounter of the first kind. So you beautifully articulated and set the stage for what are the stages then? Can we identify for all the great traditions? So when you have the logos, you could put Yahweh here, Allah here, Shunyata, Buddha, Dharma here, Yoga, Om, Brahman here, Tao here, for example. They're all names for the infinite. And the infinite has infinite names, and they're infinitely one. And that means unum. And the multiplicity, all diversity is within the unum. And so when we cross from myself here to myself here, that individual, that self, into the crossing out of this technology, being held back and colonized, so to speak, rationally colonized in the space. I mean, all life is colonized, but it cuts me off from the flow of unity. That's the point. That's the unum, pluribus, the vast, infinite diversity. Every point here is connected with everything else. That's the pluribus unum. To be in this place is to be diverse, so the self and the other are other. It's genuinely other, but always interconnected. The self here, I, and the other is objectified. And so if we try to look at love here, the relationship of love is going to be objectified. But love here is a direct, intimate encounter of sacred space. So this crossing is all important. And we humans, we try to dialogue here and have interfaith dialogue, intercultural dialogue, interdisciplinary understanding. We're trying to find the connections across the borders of our worldviews and perspectives and narratives. And we're not able to do so because why? Because this technology keeps breaking it into pieces, and the best you can get is connection monologue. So dialogue here is not deep dialogue, real dialogue.
And I would just like to enhance what you're saying too, because guys, this is not just about, you know, interreligious or intercultural. I mean, to bring it really close to home, that upper space, that I and the double brackets up there, that's you happy. That's you free. That's you capable of love. When you were describing what we're doing down there in that lower space, when you were saying that the double bracket space is always holding us, always funding us, the infinite, if you want to call it that, it's like, I got this analogy in my mind. Imagine, silly though the analogy may be, imagine, you know, a light bulb is not going to light up without the electricity, right? But imagine that light bulb, is that light's coming from me? The light's, I'm the light. I'm doing the light. I'm the source of the light, right? Just that analogy I thought might help. That's where we are individually and collectively. Humans are taking and using and with every thought, even with every single iota of thought, where the whole thing is being. So the electricity in that analogy is life. What I'm trying to say is we're cut off from life. We're extracting it, we're fracking it, to use that analogy. It's like fracking it, like taking it unilaterally, the way we do with the oil from the earth. It's like we're fracking from life on our terms and withering on the vine because we're simultaneously ignoring that source of electricity, that source of our life. And that's inherently such a deeply depressed state of life. It's living without being in touch with life, and that is the source of depression. That is the source of all the breakdowns we're seeing. So I want to, so you don't feel like it's all that, just, it's not heady. This is not a heady thing. It's calling a spade a spade. Let's step back and look at the human condition. Guys, all of this suffering that we're normalizing, we've gotten used to it to a degree. I mean, we've almost gotten used to the depression. If you look at the opioid crisis, for example, in a little silo, and you don't look and see it in this big picture, what is it about that that epidemic? What's driving that epidemic? What's driving that addictiveness? What's driving that need to check out from life, what we call life? So this is big, guys. What we're showing, what my dad's showing there on that diagram, is showing what is causing the deep cause of all of the suffering. And to bring it really close to home, it's not just being able to dialogue and talk with each other. This is, you want love in your life. You want to feel love. You want to connect with others. We can't have love in the everyday space that we're in. All we can have is a kind of synthetic attempt at love, but if you're in the I-it space, as you were just leaving it off when I interjected, if you're in an I-it space altogether, you can want love so badly, but you're not capable of having love. You can't realize love. It's always going to be kind of a distant dream if we don't gain the capacity and the ability, which we all have inherently, but we have to step into it. We have to exercise it. A lot of us exercise our bodies, but we don't seem to exercise our consciousness to be able to show up for love. It's not a free handout. It's not like, yes, love is free in a deep sense, but it's not like, oh, we're just all granted it without having to do anything. We have got to gain the capacity to be able to love, to be able to dialogue, to be able to have peace. The word able is what we're talking about here. So I just wanted I want this to really hit home for you guys. Like, this is not some esoteric thing here. We're talking about everything in your life right now that you're just so depressed about or frustrated with, and you don't know why it can't work. You look at your culture or your country and you see all this scary division, polarization, for example, or all forms of that. This is what it is. We're showing you what is causing it. So if you want to really to overcome it, keep following us, and we're gonna show you that. So I hope you don't mind me interrupting there with that. But
didn't interrupt, Näthan. This is beautiful. What you're saying is so amazing, because what you're saying is every iota of every moment of our lives in this colonized space of objectification, I and it, is affecting myself, my own inner life, because I am cut off from me. I'm cut off from myself. And the inner dialogue, and if I have different perspectives, suppose I, as a person, which is very normal, say in a given culture, I could be a biblical person living a religious life, and that's one lens I have. My religious world is showing up here. I believe in Genesis, but I'm a scientist, and I believe in Big Bang. That's showing up a different lens. Let's say I'm a citizen. Let's say in the USA, and I want to keep my religion out of my politics, and so I'm a citizen and wearing that lens and trying to keep my religious side. And I'm also seeing my psychotherapist who's helping me to put my worlds together, and I have different worlds. I have different lenses, and I can't talk to myself. I'm disintegral. I'm hurting. I'm broken. I'm fragmented, because this is the fragmenter, the shredder. A shreds everything and puts it apart. So the deepest pathologies of the human condition across the planet, living under the influence of this matrix or logic or technology of how we think and use language and reason, is fragmenting and polarizing. The polarizing is a result, but it's my inner my own psychic inner life.
Yes, we're at war with ourselves.
That's right. Between me and me. Why? Yes. This line is all important. That's what the 7 stages are as a golden pathway to cross finally out of this space into the space of connectivity and love. That's the point. Deep dialogue is rational intelligence. We're in the logos. It means dialogos. Dialogue is being in the logos, out of the cave where we're fragmented and broken by the technology itself. We haven't seen the fallout of the matrix effect of living here in everything. How do I see my child? Well, she's objectified. The mother child, how's my lover? Well, she's the greatest thing in my life, right? So love and relationships and dialogue with yourself, your inner peace, your inner wholeness. Why? This is fragmentation. This is Lego land, Lego pieces. This is Logos space, sacred space. And that's well-being. That's the point you made so beautifully. What's at stake in the 7 stages of crossing this very challenging boundary and breaking the matrix colonized life into free space, a free range, is when the unum flow of life, of being. This is being. Happiness is well-being, being well. Well-being. And here our being is broken. Personally, interpersonally, intercultural, politically, every respect. All relations are fragmented, artificial, synthetic, and not organic and whole. Even I go to see the work of art. I go to the museum, see the Van Gogh painting, and I look at it with my lens here. I'm having an I-it relationship with the work of art. But here, I have a beautiful, I'm in the zone with it. I encounter, that's a space. The work of art, it's an other, but not an objectified other, it's a presence. So there are two forms of other. And stage one that we'll see now, of moving from this space there, is that moment crossing when you realize the other that you are living, whether it's your significant other, your partner, that you're objectifying him or her, and you realize, oh my God, the other is deeper than I thought. I've been using my lens and monologuing her, slashing the other with my lens. How do I open my lens to become a critical, open thinker and stand in the open, sacred space of a real encounter of the first kind? That's the place of well-being. And what you're beautifully saying is when this meditation came through 20 years ago, living in the laboratory of seeing that what we call dialogue, interfaith dialogue, bring the cultures together, bring the religions, bring the different ethnic, bring the different polarities in the political space together, and we talk to each other from our lens. That's monologue. And monologue is a kind of virus, a rational virus, a mental virus. It's a mental malpractice in how we're seeing ourselves and the other. And unless we are able to see that red zone, step back and cross over. So the 7 stages are stages of the rite of passage from being entrapped within the monologue space to crossing into the sacred space of dialogue, of well-being, of human relations, of organic, of ethics. This is the I thou. The golden rule is here. Do unto other as the other unto you, because not here, but here in the otherness. So there's sacred I thou and I it. And how do we cross from, in the human journey, evolutionary, to human up, from this technology into the open technology of the Logos code? That's really what we're going to do.
Yeah, and another way to look at it is striking me, because we're using, we're saying Om and Logos and Tao and God and Yahweh as God names. But if we just take it from the perspective of nature and think about nature, everything in nature and what we call the environment, taken in the deepest sense, not just in our own atmosphere, but the whole of the universe, really. The environment operates in that higher code, if you think about it, because everything is interrelational. Everything is co-evolving, right? The oxygen, oxygen was poisonous to the original organisms of the planet, but then because oxygen came, then we had organisms that evolved to assimilate oxygen. And I'm just picking one example, and the way not to make it too literally Darwinian, but what's called the survival of the fittest is not a great way of seeing it. But thinking about how we co-evolve, we're lifting each other up, and then imagine humans come along with an even greater evolutionary advance in this. I saw a show talking about human evolution. There was, they were calling it pattern recognition, as is something that humans had at a whole other level. Well, what's pattern recognition? I mean, in the deepest sense, we have this rational capacity. We have this this ability to think at a whole other level, which is an incredible upgrade, right? But then we had to learn how to handle it. and on the way, as you pointed out, that all those lines going up in our evolutionary process, the whole A is A technology, which is just simply put, guys, is just naming. We name things. Everything has a label, man, woman, water, bottle, computer, blah, blah, blah. We name everything to death. I mean, when we're teaching a child how to speak, well, how does that start? We go, this is a bottle, and this is a binky, and this is, red, and this is blue. And, we just do it automatically. Like we just know that we have to teach the kid language so that we can get along and communicate, right? But there's this code that's going in while that's happening. And that code, as harmless as it seems, it's like, well, of course, we have to name everything. We don't even think about it. But if you look behind it and see what's happening, everything that gets its own little label, its own little tag, what comes with it, if we do this in an unwoke sort of way, is we package everything. We isolate everything. We separate everything. We fragment everything. Look at how we talk about the body. Professionals of the body like to fancy themselves professionals when they know the name, the label of every part. But if you look at how nature works, we weren't pieced together. Just because we're good at dissecting and labeling doesn't mean that's how nature and reality works. So think of it this way. Reality has been an I-thou intelligence co-evolving everything in this beautiful dance. Humans come along with this extra special evolutionary thing, but lo and behold, you can mess up with it. You can misuse it. You can abuse it. Now, I think that's been a part of our learning process, to misuse our rational power in this lower code, in the red space down there below. But now it's such an exciting time, because now, having fleshed out how bad that can get, guys, it doesn't have to get worse than it already is and already has been. We're ready now to join the intelligence that nature is, and that has guided our whole evolutionary process, including our rational evolution. That's all from nature. So I just want to kind of bring in another angle, I must think of nature as somewhere between science and God, if you want to think of it that way. Like, nature is obviously intelligent, and we're a part of that. But it's time to get hip to the deep code that nature is using. And I think that's kind of another way of looking at this I-thou intelligence. It's time to join that, and if we don't, we are alienating ourselves from the natural flow. And then when you look at pollution, climate change, and all these different things that are going on that are harmful and alienating to the environment and to ourselves, trace it back to this. Trace it back to this code that's inhibiting us and retarding us from being able to dialogue. Dialogue is the flow of nature. Dialogue is the intelligence of nature. Again, go beyond conversation. Upgrade your definition of dialogue from two people talking to the intelligence of nature. The capacity of it's the I-thou intelligence, and we all have it in us already. So I just wanted to say that.
That's beautiful. Adaptation, to being adaptive or to be maladapted. What's becoming clear in the human cultural ecology now, under the sway of this matrix or code or logic or stage of rational development, to talk about it, naming it. When you name it, what is it? What is language for? To present and represent the world. And we use language to talk about the world. Language by here is to talk about it. But when you cross into the deeper space of dialogue, where the being, the flow of reality, is deeply interconnected without any separate pieces. There are no Lego separate pieces. Here, this is Lego pieces, separate units. But here, the unit is the integral flow of the whole. And that is the adaptivity of nature, nature's flow. Nature is the embodiment of the Logos. And so when certain great teachers who are trying to help humanity here rise, when Lord Krishna, the voice of Om, is speaking to Arjuna, the warrior in the battlefield, with the divided battle out there before him, and he discovers the inner battle within himself, between himself and himself, and Krishna teaches him the stages of crossing into the yoga. And not that you're a master yoga teacher, and you really show people that your body here is objectified, it's ossified, it's reified, it's made an it, and it isn't the nature's body, the yoga body.
Exactly.
The body, the mind body, right? Whatever it is about it, that's an example. So this great crossing, Jesus speaking here, unless you die, you can't be born. And so this cut is a cut that separates us from the source, from the Logos. So if Jesus is the Logos in the flesh, you use the Jesus example. When he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the way. What way? The way. The way. What is the Tao? The way. What is Om? The way. What is the way to the Logos? Of science, of becoming cognitively mature, to integrate in a rational. This is deep reason. This is awakened reason. This is adolescent reason, analogous to the caterpillar becoming a butterfly. There's a rite of passage. So the 7 stages, we're going to help our friends experience is stage one is beginning to realize that the other that I thought was my other is other to me. It's a deeper other. It's the first inkling of opening up that space. So this is a hologram. It's not just a diagram in two dimension. It's a hologram for the planet. And the pathway is a global pathway of all of our great scriptures and enlightenment teachings on the journey of science to get to the unified field. The space-time continuum is not here. It's tapping into the deeper space of quantum reality, if you want to speak that way. Science needs to get cognitively awakened. This is a space of reason. This is a space of being a person, a human, a moral being, a rational being, cognitively alive, a compassionate being. Ethics is here. Why would Jesus, for example, say, love the other as yourself? Because you and the other, even your enemy, is connected with you. So we don't want to demonize anyone. Everyone who's in this space is vastly diverse. Good people, bad people, awakened people, hurting people, all of the brilliance and the art and the science and the going on within this space is great. It's funded by the source. We couldn't do all of the great breakthroughs of humanity and high points and nobility and courage and moral development and sacrifices. Couldn't happen without the perpetual presence of the source, calling us to make this rite of passage in our evolutionary adaptation, because this is now maladaptive.
Yes.
The fragmentation is so bad, so severe in our inner life, in our interpersonal life, in our objectifying of each other, in the homophobia, sexism, racism, ethnic cleansing, polar breakdown, the failure of democracy, the failure of relationship, all caused by the dominant cause. So how do we leave the monologue and cross into dialogue? That's the 7 stages now of deep dialogue. Why don't we do this now?
Yeah, good segue.
It's a while to say that. Dialogue. We use the word dialogue here, but we're trying to say dialogue here is still mono. It's got the mono.
Yeah, and again, to reiterate, you got to understand, this is about being happy, healthy, whole. We all want that. There's not a single person that doesn't want a healthy love life, a healthy sex life, a healthy community, there's nothing sexier than getting woke, guys. I mean, this is not some heady thing. And I can't stress that enough. And so we took this extra time, I feel, to pique your interest and realize there's nothing really more pertinent to your thriving and your being happy. Because without getting to the source of it, I just want to say this really quick as another very helpful analogy. Back in the early days of trying to understand the movements of the heavenly bodies and the planets and the stars and all around us, we had Ptolemy trying to figure that out, and just naturally you'd put Earth at the center. Why? Because here we are and we're looking out, it's all moving around us, it appears, right? And that seems very, very reasonable. Of course, anybody would start that way. And yet, the more deeply he tried to figure out the patterns and the cycles, had to kind of create epicycles and all kinds of different, backbends, so to speak, to try to explain these irregular movements. Why? Because he had the wrong thing at the center. It's kind of an analogy for self at the center, which is on a deeper level, this code. When Copernicus came around and suggested, let's put the sun at the center, which is a metaphorical shift now for what we're talking about here, everything made sense. All those complications and confusions that were going on trying to figure it out, when he had the proper center at the center, the sun in this case, then the movements of the planets and the stars, and it all started to make more sense. It cleaned up, it clarified. A metaphor for sanity, happiness, well-being, right? So in this case, if we were to use that analogy, guys, we've been in a Ptolemy kind of positioning. We've been all disoriented, and we're trying to figure out the problems with the problems still fully in place. And that's like the Ptolemy situation here. And in this analogy, going into deep dialogue is like that inversion that takes place, that simplification. It's not that what we're doing is complicated, it's that we are already complicated. That's what this lower space is fragmentation, it's confusion, it's disarray.
It's very messy.
It's messy. Our lives are messy. And that's not sexy. That's not fun. That's not healthy. That's not happy. It is depression. And so if you really let that come to your heart, what we're presenting here is a way, an opening to reorient yourself. Does that take work? Yes, it takes work. Are you going to have to, you might feel like your head is going like, sometimes. Yes, it's going to happen. That's how you know it's working, because our heads have been dimmed down. You know, use a light bulb analogy. If you're a light bulb that's taking credit for your own light, you become a dim bulb. But when you open up to the light, you become a bright bulb. You turn on the lights. That's what this is about. And that's well-being. That's happiness. And the filament is busted right here, you know, so to speak. The filament's broken. You don't get much light if a light bulb's filament is broken. So this is like akin to healing that deep, severance, if you will, from sanity, from light, from reason. And as we heal that, the lights turn on, and life turns on, and love turns on, and all the things that we were looking for in our dim bulb space. I'm going to get lots of money. I'm going to get lots of, I'm going to get really fit, and then I'll get, I'll attract partners, and I'm going to gain success and status, or I'm going to become famous, and then I'll feel good about myself. All these ways that we're trying to compensate for a fundamental lack of source life in our life. And we just don't, we've been misdiagnosing the situation, and we're looking in all the wrong places. You heard the song, looking for love in all the wrong places. We've been looking for life in all the wrong places, looking for happiness in all the wrong places. We have to go to the source of what's cutting us off from happiness, because it's not elsewhere. Happiness is right here in epic abundance. And so it begs the question, then why are we not feeling it? What's cutting us off from it? Because it's our birthright as humans to be happy. It's our birthright to be free and to have well-being. So back to that point I made a while back, if it were easy, we would have gotten it by now. But once we see seeing the problem is a little challenging at first. So once we see it, then it becomes easier than ever. The healing process becomes easier than ever, ironically. But you got to pick up your mind, from the slump that we've all gotten in the information space, and we gotta stretch our minds a little bit. So I just wanted to say that before we start reading. Please sit up, take deep breaths with us, and know that this is not just words. This is healing the filaments, so to speak, of your mind, of your consciousness. And with that, shall we start reading?
Yes, just to echo what you've just said. So this is when we put ourselves first, I or we, or your culture, or your religion, your identity, your narrative, your story first. Even though you might even speak of God as first, or God is higher. You can speak of what's higher here, but it's still not higher.
Mm-hmm. That's the Ptolemy.
When we put in, as you beautifully say, the Ptolemaic, so to speak, ontology, to use it, not just the cosmos around us, but the planetary system, but to be implanted here in the me first, I first, we first, my story first presides, to go to what's really first. That's the point. What's first? The infinite source. By whatever name, Yahweh, Allah, God Christ, Buddha, Shunyata, Om, Tao, Brahman, whatever name you use for the infinite, the grand unified field, whatever name you use, that's first. Being is first. And if we put a derivative, this is derivative, it's a download. Here, all of our narratives and stories are downloads. And therefore, it cuts us off from a deeper access to the real on the ground floor. A direct encounter of what is first, putting what's first. Unless we put first, which is crossing. So the 7 stages are represented by this, breaking the barrier, crossing the line, and entering into the awakened rational life of love and compassion and ethics and politics and democracy. 1776, for example, is here. The Russian Revolution, the French Revolution, liberté, égalité, fraternity, whatever the human revolution to freedom. This is the free range of a land of the free, and this is the Lego space. And the Lego land is not free, it's colonized. I mean, must cross into freedom and well-being. This is first. So let's do it, Näthan. Enough,
All right.
Preparation for it. So help take us through the meditation. This is a meditation. It's not information, it's trans-information. It's a journey, a meditative journey from being in monologue and the opening of the crossing into dialogue, dialogos. So maybe we should look at this, the headlines of the 7 stages before we go into the detailed presentation of it. So
you want to read the titles?
Well, the stage 1 is the radical encountering of difference.
Encountering. Yes.
Encountering the radical encountering of difference. The self faces the other. You begin to realize that the other was not just your other, but it's deeper than you thought. The second stage is, do I dare open up, crossing over, letting go, and entering the world of the other? The self is transformed through empathy and sympathy and compassion to enter into the world of the other. Stage 3, now I'm in that world. I'm walking in the shoe of the other. I'm seeing through his or her lens. So it's inhabiting and experiencing the world of the other. And there's a deep transformation one goes through when you step back from your own world that you're familiar, what's normalized for you in your orientation, to enter into the perspective, a worldview of the other, is to experience the world in a profoundly different way. So the self is transformed into the world of the other. Stage 4, but I realize, how do I go back home? How do I cross back with this new experience, an expanded opening and dilation of my life that's taking place as I begin to make the crossing? So the self returns home with a new awakened knowledge. And you can't find the old home you have. You're not going to go back into where you were before, because you've transformed. So stage 5, there's a dialogical, a critical, rational awakening, a radical mind shift from the self, and the self is inwardly transformed. The awakening has begun, the rational, critical awakening of a human being, to start leaving the cave in that dialogical awakening into dialogue. And stage 6 has 3 different movements within it, so to speak, but it's now a global awakening. All of the different worlds and narratives and forms of life are beginning to be experienced in that deep global space. A global awakening, the paradigm shift, that moving from the Ptolemy to the Copernican, so to speak, to the global, from the mono lens to the dialogue lens. The dialogue lens starts to open in a paradigm shift, a new rational way to be in the world. The self is now related in a deep, open, new kind of relationship to self, others, and the world. And then finally, in the maturation of this new perspective of the global lens is open. The global mind, the global heart, the global human, the LogoSapien, not a LegoSapien. The LogoSapien is arriving, and when that begins to be practiced and embodied and you become more centered and a virtuoso in this space of dialogue, the 7th stage, which is the maturation of the human being. For all humans across the planet, all religions, all enlightenment journeys, all scientific cognitive development, is personal and global transforming of life and behavior. The self lives and acts in a new global dialogical consciousness, the awakened human being, awakened reason. And now that's the place of LogoSapiens. That's the place of USA, for example. From USA here to USA here. However you like, all humans, whatever. Being a Christian here to being an awakened Christian. Being a Jew to being an awakened Jew. A Muslim, Muslim. Scientist, scientist. Whatever it is, my gender gets deepened. My relationship with my child is deepened with the child here. Father, son, mother, daughter. Here. My lover here. Everything is now deepened. And imagine as we mature into this space of first is first, in the space of dialogue, Näthan, what a culture it'll be of human flourishing and mutual respect and ethics. Ethics is to never treat a person as an object. And here is when you stand in the sacred space. That's the 7th stage. So let's go through it and try to just for this rite of passage. Would you like to present the first stage?
Certainly. Okay, I'll read the title again. Stage 1, radical encountering of difference, self faces the other. This first encounter comes with a certain shock, with a realization of an other, a different way of life, a different worldview, an alien other that resists, interrupts, and disrupts my settled patterns of interpretation. With this primal encounter, there is a new realization that my habits of mind cannot make sense of this other. This radical encounter with difference, a different world, a different way of making sense of and experiencing the world is disconcerting, sometimes threatening, and evokes a vulnerability to this alien presence. I have a new sense of delimitation, and I feel challenged to change, to revise my way of relating to this other. I realize now that my habit of translating the other into my pattern of minding, of appropriating the other to my worldview, is dysfunctional. I am forced toward a self-critical thinking. So I face a sudden silence, pause, opening, an open horizon of uncertainty and risk. I must make a decision to move forward or draw back.
Well performed. Good opening meditation, Nathan. We're not going to discuss the details of it yet because I want to see the flow of this, but this is very few people really have this depth of deep dialogue to encounter the other as genuinely other. We know how to see the other with our lens, but to be able to step back from seeing only from our lens. Say if I'm a Christian and I have a Christian lens and I'm seeing a Muslim or a non-believer, a scientist who is an atheist, for example, or a Hindu or whatever the other may be. And I know my truth. My lens is true. I know my Jesus is the truth. My God is the truth. And I'm seeing the other through my lens. And I can tolerate that other. But I'm violating the other. I'm not allowing space for the other to be revealed and encountered in an open way in which she can speak in her own voice, in which I can listen to the other. Very few people enter this deep listening, this opening to whatever it is, to the other, whatever it may be, nature, the ecology, a work of art, the sunset, my child, my lover, my partner, whatever.
And you may not realize when you're doing that.
That's right. It's not that we can't be in the zone. When we have spontaneous moments of being in the zone, there's no question that even though our dominant everyday life and culture may be habituated here, there are moments when we have peak performance and we spontaneously, because the zone, the source of reality, the infinite force is always supporting us, sustaining us wherever we are, but calling us to rise at the same time. So we can have spontaneous moments of peak performance. I just listened to the music, I became one with the music. I never had that experience. I was running in nature and I became one, I became the running. I was the double bracket running, right? The soccer team was just clicked into the zone and the force was with them. Those moments, we do have those moments of spontaneous encounters and unified flow of deep dialogue. We tap the deep dialogue. So these stages are not single bracket stages of linear stage 1 and then stage 2 and then stage 3. That they're all interwoven already. Not linear severed stages.
That's important. Yeah.
They're holographic, integral, fractal stages. So if you got stage 1, you're already tapping 7. If you have 7, you're tapping 1, and 2 and 3 and 4.
I've certainly noticed that in my path, that sometimes I feel like I'm getting stage 1 for the first time. And I was like, I thought I already had stage 1, but now I'm realizing I could get the other even deeper than I thought I already was.
Otherness of the other is it's not that the other is we're connected here. The other, you and the other. In other words, the sense of the Lego self is I am an atomic separate entity. I've got my space. It's private, only me. I'm cut off from the other. I'm alone here. But the awakened self is an I-thou self, a dialogic self. You and the other are already intertwined. That's why if I slash the other, I slash me. If I slash me, I slash the other. It's not put myself first or the other first. It's that they arise together. That's
a really good point to bring that up, because a lot of people make the move of, oh, I'm not selfish. I always put the other first, as though that's this kind of altruistic, noble position to take, but it's actually self-defeating because you're not getting the deeper science. You can't put the other first at your expense or vice versa. They're both the same, being cut off from I, thou. So self-care is just as important as other care.
That's right. That's because of the science of that is because we're interwoven, as you beautifully pointed. And so when Buddha, for example, saw that all things co-arise together, he means the dialogic universe. As a continuum. The unum is a continuum. Reality is a continuum. It's not separate pieces or Lego pieces. And we're living in Lego land. And that's why even if we try dialogue here, it's going to be captured by monologue. On the mono mind.
Yeah.
And to really cross at stage 1, this is OMG, when you realize the other, you've been doing this to the other slashing him or her with your lens.
Mm-hmm.
When you begin to realize the other opens up and you're stunned by it.
Mm-hmm.
And now stage one, you feel vulnerable. Do I let go of this and
Mm-hmm.
do I dare show up for the game?
Mm-hmm.
Do I cross over to meet the other?
Mm-hmm.
And listen and open my mind and my ears? That's why it's
and it's just not just with other people. It's with your own self. It's with nature. You know, I think about the way a lot of people see an insect and go, ugh, you know what I mean? Think about how many ways we're scared of the other, the difference, strangeness. That's that vulnerability you're speaking of. There's
a phobia of the other.
And they're all downloads of the phobia of the other religion, the phobia of the other sex, the phobia of those are all downloads of the deepest phobia of all, which is that infinite pluribus, the infinite diversity of reality.
Autophobia, fear of the self.
Yes.
Because why is it scary to do this? Because you've got to let go of what's been familiar all your life, all your identity.
Right.
And that's dying.
Yeah, exactly. It's I like to often say your prison cell has gotten mighty comfortable. You know what I mean? Like we can the very thing that's suffocating us and killing us. We think, well, of course I don't want to be there. But do you realize what it takes to let that drop away? To let that familiar, because it's asphyxiating, but also strangely we don't want to let that go. It's like that encasement is in a way our home, you know. And so to let that go is a very profound thing. So I want to reiterate that through this process, that this shift is indeed scary in the best way.
And that's what the end of this meditation, opening one, is that so I face a sudden silence, a pause, an opening, an open horizon of uncertainty and risk. Mm-hmm. And I must make a decision. Do I do this or do I stay here? Mm-hmm. The fear of dialogue, the fear of logos, mm-hmm. Logophobia.
That's right.
Mythology, the hatred and fear of reason, to grow into the deeper reason. Do I dare get awakened? Do I enter this path, step one? So step two, let's go deeper now.
Yes.
May I present this?
Yes, please.
So stage two, to build now, I decide to go over. I'm going to go for this now. So it's crossing over, letting go, and entering the world of the other. And now the self is transformed through empathy, rational compassion and relationality, empathy, deep ontological empathy. Here we go. So after the initial shock and realization that I now face an alien world, a worldview very different from my own, I feel challenged to inquire, to investigate, to change, engage, and enter this new world, to engage in critical thinking. As I open myself to this other, I realize that I need to stand back and distance myself from my former habits and patterns of minding the world. I begin to realize that this other world organizes and processes the world very differently from my way. I realize that I must learn new habits and ways of interpretation to make sense of this different world. I must learn a new language, so to speak. Indeed, I must translate myself into a different form of life and see the world differently. And this involves a bracketing and setting aside of my prejudices, my lens. I feel a new horizon opening. So this stage now, any thoughts about this? We want to not keep going long because time is moving in our time limit for this presentation.
Well, I also want to let it breathe, and if we go into a part two, we can go part two. But what I feel in this is a natural progression from the first stage. I'm starting to where in the first perhaps is a little bit more at arm's length, where you can still turn back as you suggest in the end. This is when the person says, "Oh, I'm going to proceed," and there's almost a no turning back kind of thing at this point, because it would almost go against a newly awakened ethical sense of how you need to meet the other, and you couldn't in good conscience go backward at this point. That's kind of the feeling I get when you seek to engage in critical thinking and taking that next step, a point of no return in a way.
That's very important, and that you just say very few people truly get into stage one. It takes a great accomplishment of the journey of a human being to truly enter stage one. We don't automatically get there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a moment of getting awakened, a certain shock.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's a getting humble. There's a humbling that comes from living life in the single bracket space in that code, almost against the current of life, of reality. There's a certain point of getting humbled enough to you say, okay, I'm not in charge of reality the way I thought I was.
That's right. So there's so many models, like when Socrates was saying, I know what I've got in my culture is not the truth and not the reason, not logos, not science, not philosophy. And that's why he was a wise man. He said he didn't have the answer, but he had the humility to realize he didn't have the answer. It's sophistry around him. It's really, in that respect. And we had to leave the cave. Mm-hmm. To realize you're in a cave is a great moment. Or when Arjuna breaks down on the battlefield and his life collapses, his whole ethics as a warrior collapses on him. And he realizes that his worldview makes no sense. He's in a life crisis. And anyone can have a midlife crisis at any time in your life. In your teenage years, you can have a life crisis. Your worldview collapses. And you realize at that point, how do I get an answer? What is the answer to this? And that's when there's the possibility of an opening to go deeper into making the crosses into stage 2, 3, and beyond of inquiry, of science, of ontology.
That's it. It's inquiry. That's the openness. There's an openness, a telltale openness that I'm using the word humble. Humble means open. Open to learn, open to grow, open to inquiry.
Yes. And it's deep to be in a closed mind, a closed, colonized, rational space, and to open up space into the deeper encounter with the logos. Mm-hmm. And entering into dialogue is a huge moment of human inquiry and cognition, and knowing, and being, and loving, and relating from where I've been before. And so the pathway here of survival and thrival for humans is to be on this path. And the point, before we move on, is at the end of stage 1, if anyone begins to think that there's certain cultures or perspectives or ways of being in the world that says refuses to go into dialogue. Mm-hmm. There's no way. So in a situation of racism, right, you're not going to dialogue with the other person who's calling for civil rights. You're not going to dialogue with it. Right? If you're having your truth and you're a believer, whatever it may be, your radical view, and you're trying to encounter someone who's questioning your worldview, most people say, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to dialogue. I'm not going to step back from my lens. Mm-hmm.
No, I'm looking at, just today, they're voting on the impeachment there, and just right down the middle, right down the middle of everybody.
That's an example of ideological monologue.
Yay and nay, yeah. And they're not going to go into each other's worlds.
That's right.
No way.
It's too threatening. That's monologue. That's ideology, right? That's a monovirus. So the clash of religions, the clash of perspectives, the clash of ideologies, the culture wars, right? All of those which are raging here. It's a refusal to even begin dialogue.
Yeah.
You try to get a peace here, you can't get peace here. It's pressure.
And you think you're forwarding your agenda, but you're really condemning yourself when you deny dialogue. That's all. It's going to play out over time when you further your own myopic interests, your ideology. You have the illusion that you're furthering yourself, but you are doing the exact opposite.
Exactly right.
You're condemning yourself.
So one of the questions we have in the 7 stages, it always comes up for me when this was presented around the globe in certain very powerful settings, and people realize, how do you dialogue with an other that doesn't wish to dialogue? Right? So this is really, in a way, a journey of the self from becoming a derivative person to becoming a first person. That's the orientation of the stages. But we're not facing, so how do you then dialogue with an other who refuses to dialogue? And there's no way going to dialogue. And yet you have to live with him or her, or the other culture, or the other ideology. Big questions are here. And not the time, we want to be sensitive to the time. We didn't want to go beyond an hour and a half in this session. But you're right, we can have several sessions of this. Stage 1 itself could take an hour explanation. Stage 2, each of these stages, when you say a global gold print, it's not just a blueprint, even though the line is blue, it's a gold print, this pathway, right? And each step is a monumental evolutionary step in human development. We know that we can spend deep time massaging each of the steps, but we're right now trying to go through and get the continuity.
Good. Let's keep it going then. I'll read 3.
Okay, take 3.
Okay, stage 3. Inhabiting and experiencing the world of the other, self transformed into the other. I begin to feel a new and deep empathy for my new habitat. I want to let myself go, free myself to enter, experiment, learn, and grow in this new way of being, to embrace critical thinking. I hold on to my prior views as much as I can, but I do advance in a conservative fashion. Still, I experience an excitement in discovering and inhabiting a new and different worldview. I have a new profound realization of an other, an alternative reality and form of life. But in the end, I realize this is not my home, but what is my home? I experience a deep shift in my life world. Who am I? What is my true identity? Is this other part of me? Is my world transforming now? I think of 2 well-known movies, Dances with Wolves, when he starts off as a soldier for the U.S. Army and transitions into the Native American way of life, the Lakota, in that movie. And I think of a more recent movie, Avatar, the guy who starts off working for the agenda of the military he's serving to extract this valuable mineral, and then goes into, he was just going to research, he got tricked in by his own agenda to learn the ins and outs of this tribe, but then he finds himself falling in love with this way of life and realizing it's so much more alive. So those are 2 popular pop culture kind of examples of, I feel, that kind of speak to this stage.
Very, very nicely done, Nath. And again, there's so much more to say about that excitement of a critical thinking. But the main theme that I'd like to see at the end is, who am I? When you start to leave your home, your metaphysical existential home, your culture, your worldview, and make a transition to open that doorway into the world of the other, and realize that there are different worlds, they're different, and you can experience reality in a different way, right? Then it questions your identity as you've known it. Mm-hmm. Who am I? Is this me? Is there another me? Who am I? What is my home? That's to play on the words here. You haven't hit your omies yet. You mm-hmm. haven't gotten to home base, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. My home can be home, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. I'm familiar here. There's no question about it. And FOMO, fear of missing out, with my tribe, my ideology. Mm-hmm. My home is here. Mm-hmm. But when you leave home and you get on the path, that's why it's so scary. Who am I? What is my home? What is my identity? And that takes us into stage 4. So it becomes a trauma, an existential trauma for me. Mm-hmm. I'm asking, who am I? Where am I? You mm-hmm. get a kind of disorientation. Mm-hmm. So it's not just a la-di-da, a walk in the park. Mm-hmm. It's a deep challenge, and it takes courage to enter deep dialogue.
Yes. So it's deeper than just going into the other world. It's leaving the familiar fixity of your sense of self. That gets jarred, and that's like, if I can go into that world and experience it authentically, then who I thought I wasn't actually who I was.
Right. So for example, let's say I'm a believing Christian. I've been living in my Christ. I know that Jesus, my Christ, is the truth. Beyond question. But I've now somehow gone into the world of the Lakota, or let's say I've gone into the Hindu world in my yoga, or I've gone into the Buddha world, and I realized Buddha was enlightened too. There is deep truth in Buddha's vision. And I can hold both Christ without giving up my Christ and my Jesus. I'm now beginning to see the power of Buddha. Mm-hmm. Now what do I do? Because I thought there was only one truth. But on the ground floor, I begin to see there's another world that has validity and power and vision. I tasted it. I had it. Now what do I do? Mm-hmm. How do I go home from here? It's that deep. So let's go into stage 4.
Beautiful.
I'll take this one now. Crossing back. With this new expanded vision, the self returns home, in quotes, with this new awakened knowledge. So I cross back, return to my own world, bringing back new awareness or knowledge of how to think and act, to be a critical, awakened thinker. I may even wish to adapt and adopt some of this for myself in my new way. As a result of this primary encounter with the world of the other, I now realize that there are other ways of understanding reality. I'm therefore open to rethinking how I see myself, others, and the world. I encounter myself and culture anew with a newly open mind. My encounter with radical difference now challenges my former identity, and everything begins to appear in a new light. There now begins a dramatic deepening of my sense of myself, my identity, my ethnicity, my life world, my religion, my culture. There's no return to my former unilateral, monocentric way of minding. So we need to breathe at each of these stages of this meditation. That moment that everyone would have to go through in the challenging, and all of our great spiritual paths say, you've got to leave home. You got to leave home. You got to detach. You got to let go of Isaac. You got to leave home. You got to go homeless on the journey, right? And so, but you're on your way to your new home, your own base, so to speak, right? You're on your way home, but it's really upsetting and disorienting to go through the stage 4. And we'll see in a moment, it's going to create turbulence with my homies. If you're a believing Christian and was part of a Christian community, I'm not only picking on that, we're scientists and part of a believing scientist community of the values of facticity of science and scientific method. And I come back and realize there's another way to see medicine. Acupuncture works. Or perhaps Ayurvedic medicine is worth attending to, or naturopathic medicine. And you go back to your homies and they think you're crazy, right? You're new age, you're just woo-woo. You're just, you have no credibility to bring in other medicines, because we know that allopathic scientific method is the only way to get real medicine. It's tried and true scientific method. For example, right, whether it's your religious life, your scientific life, your cultural orientation, when you go back to your homies with this new attitude, you're going to hit turbulence with your homies. And that's going to come up next. So would you like to take stage 5, Näthan?
Gladly. The dialogical critical awakening, a radical mind shift, self inwardly transformed. As a result of this new encounter with self, when I cross back from my deep encounter with an other, I begin to experience a profound shift in all aspects of my world, in my inner experience, in my encounter with others, in my relating to the world. I begin to realize that my encounter with the other has shaken the foundation of my former worldview, my former identity. For now that I am mindful of the living reality of other worlds, other perspectives, I can no longer return to my former identity and forget this living presence of the other. Indeed, I now begin to realize that there are many other worlds, other forms of life, other perspectives that surround me. I now open to a plurality of other worlds and perspectives, and this irrevocably changes my sense of self. I feel transformed to a deeper sense of relation and connection with my ecology. I feel more deeply rooted in this experience of connectivity and community. I now see that my true identity is essentially connected with this expansive network of relations with others. This is the ignition of the dialogical critical awakening. Wow.
You feel it?
I do. I literally feel it.
So it's a new identity that's opening up at this point. And now this is the dialogical turn, from monologue to dialogue. You've crossed now into dialogic space. You're in the Logos now. You've crossed out of that barrier of being immersed and embedded within the colonized space of monologue. And you're beginning to really understand that there are different perspectives. There's a pluralistic world. It's pluribus. The cultural space has opened up. Think of America, USA. It's a multicultural society. It's a multi-perspective, multiple worlds and orientations and worldviews in the common political space, right? Who am I now? And how can we be we the people? And one polis. How can we communicate across our borders of our worldviews in that new awakened political space, where it's not monocentric, but pluribus? So this is the unum pluribus space in the American case, for example. if America is a political space of multiculturals and multiple perspectives, and we want to embrace diversity, but diversity in the monospace is just fragmented into separate tables and tribes and subcultures that are not speaking the language of each other. They're in monologue. So it's just a broken pluribus. So sheer pluralism without the unum is broken. On the road to dialogue, the pluribus, the multiplicity in unum, diversity in unum is the place of dialogue. That's where we flourish. That's where the cultural technology must evolve to be a global human being, a global sapien, a LogoSapien. So let's go into stage 6, which has 3 different subtexts. Let's both do this, Nathan. I'll begin. So stage 6 now, the global awakening, the crossing into the rational space. The paradigm shift matures now. The self related to the self, to your own self, to others, and to the world. So in my transformed dialogical critical awakening, I discover a deeper common ground between the multiple worlds and perspectives that surround me. I have a new sense that self and others are inseparably bound together in a boundless interrelational web. I realize that multiplicity and diversity enriches myself and my world. I now see that all worlds are situated in a common ground of reality, and that radical differences are nevertheless situated in a field of unity, unum pluribus. I experience 3 related dimensions of this global dialogical or critical awakening. First, Nathan, take it. A.
An ever-deepening discovery of self. I become aware of a deep inner dialogue within myself. I discover a rich multiplicity and diversity of perspectives within my own inner world. In this inner dialogue, I feel increasingly more deeply rooted and grounded in my world. My identity is enriched with multiplicity, and I experience a more potent sense of my uniqueness as I celebrate my expanded world of shared relation with others and with the ecology. Nice.
Now moving from the inner world to the outer, and a dynamic dialogue opens now with others in my community. As my new inner dialogue and critical thinking evolves, I find myself in a new and transformed relation with others who share my world, my tradition, my religion, my culture. This new phase of relations with my peers can be disorienting and disconcerting, for as I now dramatically grow in my identity, I find myself in a strange distance from many of my peers, even as I discover a deeper affinity and embrace of my community, my polis. I face a new turbulence, miscommunication, and misunderstanding with my colleagues, and a challenging and dramatic dialogue unfolds in my community or polis.
C. A global awakening emerges in all aspects of my life. As this inner and outer dialogue critical thinking matures, I realize that my understanding of my world enters a new global light. I realize that I'm surrounded with many worldviews. I enter a global horizon and a global consciousness in which interreligious, intercultural, interideological, interdisciplinary, interpersonal dialogues abound in all directions. I now have a new globalized sense of reality, a dialogical domain in which multiple alternative worlds are situated in dynamic, ever-deepening relations. With this understanding comes a new attitude to life and to ethics.
That's powerful.
It's exciting. I want that.
This is now we're in the woke place. The workplace is a woke place. The culture is woke in dialogue now. This is a great moment of ethics and compassion and flourishing and well-being and life, liberty, happiness. 1776 here is a place of the unum pluribus. And so stage 7, Nathan, I'll take this. The personal and global transforming of life and behavior. The self lives and acts in a new global dialogical consciousness as an awakened rational being. So as this paradigm shift in my life matures, I realize that there's a deep change in all aspects of my life. A new moral consciousness and a new practice. As my new dialogical critical consciousness becomes a habit of life, I find that my behavior and my disposition to self an other has blossomed. I feel a new sense of communion with myself, with others, and with the ecology. I realize that the deepest care for myself essentially involves my care for others and for the environment. I have a deeper sense of belonging to my world, to my community, and with this, a boundless sense of responsibility in all of my conduct. I now realize that I'm transformed in the deepest habits of my mind and behavior. I find a deep sense of self-realization and fulfillment and meaning in my life and my relations with others and the world around me. This is the place of being a human. This is when becoming an awakened first person, not a derivative person. I discover myself as a dialogical being, an I-thou being, the other, the ecology, the relation. I'm a relational flow. I'm woven in to the web of life and primary being.
Well, kudos for writing that 22 years ago. My God. Huh?
I didn't write it. It wrote me.
Yeah. Whatever you did to bring it into this form is really amazing. And like I said, I see it as a historical document once it is discovered en masse and people start to realize the practicality of this and necessity of this journey, and to not retreat in fear and phobia of this wide openness, but to become excited and thrilled at the prospect of truly coming alive as a human being. And I really love that point about you don't lose your identity, you lose your uniqueness. You gain your uniqueness ever deeper. And I find that as such an exciting prospect for humans, every human, you know?
That's right. Because the fear of loss of your identity or ethnicity or religion, you don't give up. If Christ is your truth, you don't give up Christ, you discover Christ, the Logos in the flesh. I am the way, the truth, and the life, right? You gain the global Christ, the Logos. If you're a scientist, you don't give up your science. You gain it in a deeper way because now your rational technology of opening up the unified field of cognition, of an encounter with nature in the primary sense. If you're an American, you don't give up American and democracy in your USA. You gain USA. 1776 here. In fact, the founders were not here. The founders were discovering and founding the code of Logos. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Self-evidence is not here. I think, well, if it's evident to me, it's true, but no, it's evidence when you tap the Logos. The evidence here surrounds you and commands your mind. That's self-evidence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. That we're all endowed by the source with unalienable rights, ontological rights, not political man-made rights, but the rights of the Logos rights of life, liberty, well-being, freedom. This is the land of the free. This is the home of colonized people in Monologue. And to change and make the 7 stages of deep dive, the global pathway for all humans, in all cultures, in all religions. You don't lose your identity, you gain it. This is who you are. And that's the fear of losing your identity. Feels like a death. But the great teachers say, unless you died in the way, symbolically, ontologically, in terms of your worldview, and cross into a deeper way of being, that's where we flourish, and that's your true identity in this space. So maybe we might conclude, and with a note that this is the beginning, an outline for a workshop, not just a workshop, a play shop. For us with our audience, and we'll have a 3-day weekend, first encounter, and then you come back and then go through each of the stages in the circle of dialogue. It's important for humans to have a workshop. Take the 7 stages.
I like workshop. That's good. That's a good, yeah.
Because woke is, not work, but woke.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah.
Right, but people can have it and they take time and share. How do I feel about stage 1? Have I ever experienced that? Did I ever have a stage 2 feeling? How about a stage 3? Have I been in that 7th stage already? You could have a flash into stage 7 before you even officially went into stage 1. So these are not linear stages. These are holographic stages. That they can all be there together. And if you really got stage 1, you're already on stage 7. You can handle stage 7, and you have the literacy and the rational capacity. You talk about the capacity, right? To develop and cultivate the capacity to sustain a life in dialogue. That is an awakened life. Right? And all of our religions need to go from being ideology bound. Your religion here is going to be so much deeper here. Your whatever your worldview is, it's going to deepen when you're in the zone, when you're tapping the source, which is what is first on home base, first base. So each stage can have a deep workshop of people discussing it and sharing their views on it and digesting it together. Because we're all, across all borders, we need to learn how to do this, to flourish as humans. Because this is maladaptive now, or even in Darwinian terms. It's maladaptive. Culture here, this culture code is maladaptive. It fragments, it breaks, we suffer, we're cut off from well-being, and we have no choice but to get woke, to be on the stage, to what is our nature as dialogue beings. Humans are dialogue beings, dialogue sapiens. Why? Because we're logos sapiens. Logos is interwoven. As you pointed out, nature is woven. It's beautiful. No separate.
That's why, and if we see the crises that are breaking out everywhere, just intensifying, and it seems like there's less and less runway, so to speak, that's why this is such an exciting time, because I think that we really are ready now. And it's not a matter of us saying, oh, we're ready now, so much as we have to be ready. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, you know, if we don't make this crossing, we, like I said earlier, we almost condemn ourselves to going extinct. You know, we have to flow with nature, in that deeper sense of nature, and upgrade our minds. And what's so beautiful is that every single human being has the capacity for it, though it may lay dormant to varying degrees, you know, but every one of us can activate it. It doesn't have to be intimidating in the sense of, oh, I don't have the smarts or the intellect, or that's just not my way. It's not that. It's actually purely simple. It's about becoming truly human, joining the dance of nature, and understanding, you know, the interrelational I-thou field of, when you called it like this web that interconnects everybody and everything, that's the web of love, you know? And if we don't know what's short-circuiting us from being able to be in that flow, we can't join that flow. So we can want love. We can even be really, really nice and a really kind, giving person and still be handicapped, so to speak, temporarily, to actually become capable of being and experiencing and living that love. Right? So we got to go deeper. Than there's a lot of people saying, you know, choose love, not fear, and all this, but that's, you know, to put it bluntly, that's weak. You know, that's not strong enough. You can't just say, oh, run towards love and away from fear. That's not strong enough, guys. And it rings of a kind of woo-woo sort of, yeah, good luck with that. Let's put daisies in the ends of rifles, you know, and wish love and rainbows on everyone. That's not good enough. The love that I'm talking about here is a kind of a badass love that we all have to, you know, there is something badass about it.
Evolve to love.
Yes, evolve to love. Exactly. Yeah.
Well done, Näthan. It's good to dialogue with you.
You as well.
In this space, and I hope this helps other people, our friends. Just listen and share, and see if it resonates with you, and if you have other pathways that you feel are more effective, to bring it out. But we've got to end up in the place of dialogue, you know, into the fundamental field. So maybe this is a good time to take a break and end this session.
Sounds good to me. I think that was perfect. And thank you so much for writing this and taking the time to unpack it for other people.
Well, thank you, Näthan. And you did very well by dancing with me through this and for setting it up and opening up the space for a global pathway for all humans. 7 stages of getting awakened and becoming full, mature, rational beings. So thank you very much for joining us and being patient. We took more time than I think we intended, but we compressed it as much as we could.
Yeah. Okay. Goodbye, everybody.